was quite a bit of hype about this new 2020 Yamaha WR250F. It's got a huge history in Australia, and for the best part of 20 years, Aussies, guys like Jeff Ballard, Stewie Morgan, Ben Grabham, even Glenn Carney, got involved with Peter Payne at Yamaha Australia. So a lot of those guys actually tested in Japan and developed this, this particular model, which first came out in 2001. Did a lot in Japan, but a lot of it was sort of, like customised to Australian conditions. So the thing's been an incredible seller throughout, and it's been interesting because, I guess what we're looking at now is, when you look at the bike that evolved and sold particularly well. 2015, I guess, was the first time that they really based the thing on the motocross bike. I think the marketing guff went along the lines of had, YZF blood running through its veins, or DNA. Then in 2018, a little bit more, they improved the brakes, they gave the engine a little bit more bottom and mid. And then on the 2020, a new generation again, largely because they've changed chassis, they've changed suspension, bodywork and engine. So let's just have a bit of a look at what this thing is. It was interesting also that Yamaha didn't actually have a media launch for the bike. So what they did is gave all the media the bike for a couple of weeks. So we've had the opportunity to do a bunch of grass track and then a whole lot of trail and typical bush sort of trails as well. We give the bike back, and we'll have it back for a couple of months after that as a project bike. So we'll evolve and develop the thing. But I guess today's about just first impressions. Like I said, we had the bike for a couple of weeks. The last few days we've been up here at Jeff Ballard's farm, up on on the western slopes of the Blue Mountains, and we've got really amazing tight. And we had some snotty, pine forest yesterday, and then some enduro loops and tight, gnarly stuff today. The thing's been a lot of fun. I think the standout change is what they've done with the ergos. They made the thing a lot slimmer. They brought the headlight back. That collectively has made the bike feel a lot more agile and compact. I think everyone jumped off it and said it was compact and agility. So that and the fact they've gone to a 7.9 litre tank, I think they've got another half a litre out of that, cleverly doing it in the middle and keeping that weight low. So that tip weight is something, it's a real standout for this machine. It has been for the predecessors, but probably more so for this one. Probably feels more like a motocross bike than any of those predecessors. Along with that, they've done some other clever little things. You look at the bash plate and there's much better protection there for the radiator hoses. They've tucked the side stand in so it doesn't stick out and doesn't get jagged in ruts. They've improved, they've taken that silly garden hose that they used to have off there for the front speedo. So now there's a nice little digi pickup, and that's all nice and neat. So they've just sort of streamlined the thing, and really what they've tried to do is sort of put it up against the European bikes that are sort of lightweight, hard nose, very much enduro focused, not like a trail bike that you can also convert, into a race bike. And I think they've done a really good job with that. In terms of the caliber suspension, that's I think that's well proven. There's a few mods that are supposed to make it a little bit plusher in the front. Didn't really notice that. What we did notice is that it was a little bit lively in the tail, in the arse end on the downhills. We dropped the forks about 5 mil through and ran them flush, which actually just creates a really beautiful chassis balance, without really compromising how quickly the thing turns. We found that also with a recent model, the 2019 model WR250F. On the engine front, there's quite a few changes. I think the most obvious thing is it converts into more top end. The thing revs out a whole lot harder. We did muck around with the mapping a bit. It was a little lurchy or a little bit uneven off the bottom, but once you're on the thing, and as you know, with a 250, you rev the things pretty hard. So if you're dawdling along on rough ground, it's just a little bit, I think it needs a little bit of refinement on that front. In terms of riding the thing, fueling was fantastic. Yeah, so they've actually bolted, I think, a few, in the clutch, they've bolted a few fibres to make it a little bit more robust. Not that it ever had a problem in the past. A little bit different feel, sort of longer take up than most of the European bikes that have got a hydraulic clutch. But I think, this thing, it's got some mumbo. Like for a 250, there's not a lot of difference. We had a couple of 350s out here today, and sure, those things have got more, but it's pretty damn impressive how you can lug the thing off the bottom. Sure, you're going to have to use a little bit more clutch, to get the thing rocking. But I think really probably the standout things, or two standout things from the engine department, is you've now got the switch. So you can you switch maps on the fly, which is really cool. And also, I think Yamaha really got to jump on their competition by putting the pouch in app together. It's sitting there on your smartphone, it's Bluetooth, you can download maps, you can exchange them with mates. So we've been mucking around with the mapping, we leaned off the jetting a little bit off the bottom, just got a little bit cleaner, the fueling that is. But also the good thing about that app, if you're a nerd, you can log everything, every practice, every setting, every piece of maintenance on the bike. So, you know, I think there's a lot of value in that. So we're really looking forward to getting the thing back for a couple of months to develop it, put a few bits and pieces on it. Really impressed with the stock bike. I think even just looking at the thing, it probably looks closer to a motocrosser than ever before, but it's not a motocross bike in the bush. And, you know, it's not just a wide ratio 6-speed gearbox and an 18-inch rear that's adapted it to the bush. You know, the engine hangers, the frame flex, the suspension settings, all those things have done a really good job at translating a motocross bike to the bush. So anyway, we've had a bunch of guys out here testing, and we're going to give each of those guys a bit of an opportunity to right now to you know, tell you about what the standout things they found about the bike over the past couple of weeks testing.
Bit of fun anyway. We've had 3 days testing a few bikes, and I've been lucky enough to get a ride on, especially on this bike behind me, which is the new WR250. Had a lot to do with it back in the day, of course, but it's been some time since I've ridden 250s, and so yeah, my very first impression was a good one. I couldn't believe how strong it felt, so that's definitely something that stood out. As soon as I took off on the thing, I went, wow, this bike's got some power, it's pretty cool. So, you know, just over the 3 days, had plenty of rides. The conditions have been pretty good, from quite slippery to now being pretty loamy and a lot of traction. Yeah, I guess my general impression was that its engine's strong and it's a pretty easy bike for me to ride. I felt comfortable. I was put in the deep end straight away, so I just started riding it and felt comfortable. For me also, suspension feels pretty good. I don't know a lot of the details about this bike. I haven't asked a lot of questions. I know it's an all new thing, or pretty much that way. I felt in some ways similar. I've got a 19 model WR250, so in some ways I guess I compared it against that. It's obviously a big engine and a lot of power in that one, but this one is surprising, a lot lighter feel, a lot more fun. Yeah, like the 450, I felt more comfortable with, they dropped the forks, and it's certainly, the bike steers incredibly fast. So in some ways you could say maybe a bit fast. It makes it a little bit nervous. It doesn't do any head shake or anything at all like that, but it just gives you a little bit more confidence in some corners, and you can certainly make it steer. I mean, it doesn't seem to affect it being a good steer. It's fantastic. So that was one of the biggest improvements, I guess, but basically we rode it quite stock and just enjoyed it. It was a good bike. So yeah, it's kind of be a little bit involved in the 250 again, and it gets you thinking. You know, I've been riding bigger bikes and I'm going, wow, maybe I should give a 250 a go. So yeah, it's been fun, a few days, and really enjoyed this bike.
So after riding Yamaha's 2019 WR450, their YZ450 and their YZ250, I've been really excited to jump on this WR250. As someone that really likes a small capacity bike, I've been really excited because I really like the chassis changes and everything that came with a 450, but it's just a bit too much power for me. So after riding this bike for 2 days, we got to ride this bike at some real fast grass track, and then around Jeff Ballard's place today, where we got pines, a bit of motocrossy stuff, and a bit more tight technical stuff. Overall, I'm really impressed with this bike. I haven't been able to adapt to Yamahas that fast in the past, but straight away, jumping on this thing, it felt really good. We dropped the fork down about 5 mil, and that just made the bike a hell of a lot more balanced and just awesome, because like the bike turns on a dime, so it almost turned too tight. So when you could rake that fork out slightly more, you could just hold the corners really nicely, and it held up really well. It's got a hell of a lot of balls for a 250. It's great around all this bush stuff. You have to work the clutch a little bit to get it going, but it performed really well, especially compared to other bikes I've been riding today. A really big standout. On grass track stuff, where we were grabbing 3rd, 4th gear down the straights, it did top out. It did run out a bit of juice up the top, but when we get this bike back as a project bike, maybe fitting an exhaust or at least a slip onto it, we'll really open that bike up more, and I reckon we'll get more power out of that. So yeah, can't wait to spend some more time on this bike. It's been really good.
So after a big day here out at Jeff Ballard's place, we're on the new 2020 250, or WR250. Got to say, first impressions are definitely really up there. For me, I'm not a massive, well, I wouldn't class myself as an experienced rider. I like to just get out there on weekends and have a putt and enjoy riding for what it is. And the big thing that made me feel comfortable on this bike is just the way it handles. I'm always a bit, well, not as confident in tipping a bike in hard into ruts, and I always feel like I need to stand it up. This is the first bike where I felt like I could track into some corners and the bike would just go with it. And then we came back and dropped the forks by about 5 mil, and that even helped even more. So great little bike with handling and stuff. I personally ride a 450, and over the years have been actually kind of outridden by the thing, and leaning more towards these smaller bikes. I feel like it's just, it's got usable power. On a 450 you're kind of snapping around and it's wanting to jump away from you. This thing, you feel in control. But that's not to say that it doesn't have a lot of power. You can use every gear and ride around second and third, and it's just, it's very easy and comfortable to ride. Also, another great thing about this compared to its predecessor, or the 2018 model, is the blue button on it. As I said before, I kind of like riding a little bit more slower and not as aggressive. So in that more tight stuff where I feel like the bike's a bit snappy and wanting to get away, I can flick on that blue button and it just tracks really well, and it doesn't feel like it's barky and getting out of my hands. Same thing with having the power tuner app. When we got it, it was a little bit funky, a bit barky, so we messed around with the ignition a little bit and tamed it down a lot, and it was a really good bike to ride. And it's the great thing about it, you can just make it your own thing. You don't get this bike and then you're forced to ride it how it is. So having that is a really good thing, and for me, made the difference on this bike. Overall, it's just a really fun bike to ride. I enjoyed every minute on it. Going over some little jumps here at the track and through some ruts, it was just awesome fun, and I never felt like it was out of my limits to ride, and I could just push it how I wanted to go. So my overall thoughts is awesome bike, looks good, rides well, and yeah.
So it's interesting getting that feedback from all the guys, you know, all the testers of varying sort of heights, weights, riding abilities and setup preferences. But I think it's probably fair to say that you know, it was overwhelmingly positive, you know, about this new 2020 bike. So we have to give this back to Yamaha Motor Australia tomorrow, sadly, but we do get it back again in a few weeks, and we're going to have it for a couple of months. And I think, you know, the important thing too is that it's, you know, motorcycle ownership is not just about the performance of the thing, it's about living with it, it's about all those maintenance issues, wear, durability, all that kind of stuff. So having the bike for a few months after that will give us an opportunity to do that, muck around with the suspension setup, put a few bits and pieces on it. So, you know, stay tuned for some of those follow-up stories we're going to do.